Baker Mayfield versus Josh Allen. Sign me up. Crossover Thursday starts now.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bills and Locked On Bucs. We are both proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Of course, we want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. That's James Yarcho, the host of Locked On Bucs, and we're here to get you ready for Week 11, where the Bills play host to the Bucs in a cross-conference showdown. We got one of those quarterback matchups. Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield. James, welcome in. I'm excited to break this one down with you.
Yeah, we were talking before we started. It seems like we're doing Bucs Bills crossovers a little more frequently than most AFC NFC matchups. So it's fun to do another one. You know, it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be a fun one. And dare I say, maybe a Super Bowl preview? Yeah, I don't know. Both teams need to get on the right track before we start talking February.
From your lips to God's ears, we'll push fast forward. We'll play in the Super Bowl and be done with this journey that I think has had some frustrations along the way for both sides of the equation. I am excited, though, because this is a marquee quarterback matchup. I mean, Baker Mayfield's a dude, Josh Allen's a dude, and I think when you get these types of guys on the same field, a couple of real alpha personalities, it's going to bring out the best of them. And so I'm excited to see the competitive side of both of these dudes going out there on the field. But James, as you do consider this game from the Bucs angle, what's the big story? What's everyone talking about in Tampa?
I think the biggest storyline for the Bucs in this one is that while the injuries continue to pile up for this team, it looks as though Bucky Irving might actually be in play for Sunday. Now, a lot of us thought that he would have been available last week coming out of the bye, but Bowles and the team shut him down. He didn't practice, anything like that, but he did practice on Wednesday during the walkthrough. Todd Bowles said to the media afterwards that he was limited and they're going to see how he progresses throughout the week and then make the decision later on. But this is a huge step in the right direction for this offense that has struggled the last 3 games. And with Bucky, it's been the shoulder injury more than the ankle that has kept him out for this long. And I don't think the Bucs wanted to rush him back and create another Mike Evans situation, right? Where he plays part of a game, takes a hard hit, makes the shoulder worse, then you lose him for the rest of the season or most of the rest of the season. So they have been overly cautious, but if he's back this week, that changes a lot of what they're going to be able to do. It opens up the run game a lot more, which is where you can beat the Bills, but then it also opens up the passing game. And with all due respect to Rashad and Sean Tucker, neither one of those guys is the threat that Bucky is out of the backfield, both as a runner and a receiver. So then the defense, isn't going to be able to focus all of their attention on Emeka Egbuka, which is what most defenses have done. Tez Johnson got 2 touchdowns last week where Egbuka was double teamed on one, triple teamed on the other. And if Bucky's back there, you just can't use that many resources on Egbuka alone. You're going to end up getting burned. So that's really going to make this game much more interesting if the Bucs get their starting running back in the fold.
You mentioned the name Tez Johnson, which reminds me that these teams played in the preseason, and the Bills, they couldn't handle Tez Johnson in that preseason game. That was a good showcase for him. And I hear you. Bucky Irving being back for the Bucs in this one would be huge. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the coming segments, but the Bills' run defense is pretty ripe to challenge. And so that would be a huge boost, of course, for Tampa, but especially against Buffalo and some of the warts that they have defending the run. From the Bills side of things, James, it's about the passing offense. And look, you might look metrically at the Bills passing offense and see that it's pretty good. There's a good story to tell if you just look at numbers. But if you watch it, you know that there's some unsettled things going on. There's not as much consistent rhythm. It's a lot of Josh Allen trying to figure it out. And they're not going to have Dalton Kincaid in this game, who's their best pass catcher. And that's a big deal. They might get Josh Palmer back. That'll be pretty significant. They might get Gabe Davis this week, which is kind of a reunion. He actually had a really good game the last time the Bills played the Bucs. They did a bunch of RPO stuff and got him the football. And so maybe they want to recapture some of that magic. So there could be some reinforcements, but ultimately you're talking about no Dalton Kincaid in this game for a passing offense that's really struggled to find some rhythm. Now, there's been times where it looks really good, like against Kansas City and Baltimore, marquee quarterback matchups, but there's been times where the Bills offense just can't get going in terms of the passing offense, like it was the case last week against the Dolphins or the Falcons. That's an opponent that I know that the Bucs fans know all about. The Bills really struggled with Atlanta. They struggled with New England. And so there's just been a very inconsistent nature to this passing offense in terms of finding rhythm and it not being, Josh Allen just go make plays. And so Tampa is certainly a very good game plan specific defense. I think there's some really good matchups for Tampa when it comes to the perimeter receivers. And so I'm very curious to see what Joe Brady has cooked up his sleeve to help this Bills passing offense find some rhythm, because I think that's going to be important for controlling this game script.
Yeah, and it kind of amazes me, from the outside looking in, that the Bills offense can always be so good when you have receivers out there like Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman and these names that are not going to strike fear into the hearts of really anybody. But Josh Allen in this offense continues to find ways to get things done. Now, like you mentioned, Dalton Kincaid not playing, that could be huge, but Dawson Knox is a solid tight end, in his own right. So I don't think it's going to eliminate the ability to funnel the offense through the tight end, through the running back, especially in the passing game, which is where the Bucs are susceptible. It's not going to cripple this Bills offense. And when you have Josh Allen, all things are possible, right? But it's funny. I was talking to my buddy last night, and it's like, God, can you imagine if the Bills in the upcoming draft trade up to land themselves a guy like Jeremiah Smith, where Josh Allen finally has that level of receiver? Like, the sky is the limit if they can just get one of those guys that can really take over a game from a wide receiver standpoint.
Now, don't tell me with Jeremiah Smith. I don't think he's eligible to 2027. So that we're a little, but hey, go ahead and do the Julio Jones trade. Go get Jeremiah Smith, because ultimately, James, we are talking about Josh Allen. This is his last year in his 20s. He turns 30 in May, and the Bills got to get real serious about finding him that number one receiver for the rest of his prime. And right now they don't have that guy. And Keon Coleman every week looks less and less likely to be that guy. And so they got to get that figured out. Obviously, the big story with the failed attempt to trade for Jalen Waddle, because Bean wouldn't give up the 2026 first, but he would give up the 2027 first. I think that's kind of goofy, James. And so that puts this passing offense even deeper under the microscope. All right, we got a lot more to get to here, and we're going to break down some of these very specific matchups that will change the game. And I think we kind of teased some of those talking points already, maybe about the Bills and their chances to get the running backs involved in the passing game, Todd Bowles and some of the game plan stuff that he might have ready for Buffalo. We'll talk about that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with us. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. The real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Well, Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. And you got to check out their part finder tools and 3D schematics. That's going to save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use our promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least two player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using Prize Picks during both football Sundays and the NBA tip-offs. It just keeps everything more exciting, and I love this, the injury reboot feature. If one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. That'll get you $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back, folks, and thank you for making both Locked On Bills and Locked On Bucs your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network, where it is your team every day. All right, James, we're going to get real specific now. Matchups that will change this game. And for me, I'm looking at a coordinator matchup. Joe Brady versus Todd Bowles, or whatever defensive structure exists in Tampa. We know it's Todd Bowles' defense. Look, we know that it's a blitz-aggressive Tampa defense. We know that they're number 2 in pressure rate. And, I don't know if they're going to have Reddick this week or not, but, it's a no from James. That's a notable one there. But I think they'll even blitz more potentially without a rusher like Reddick available. And the Bills have been okay against the blitz. They've been tested a lot, but when they're not okay, they're not okay. And you go to the Falcons game, and it was a really rough outing for Josh against the blitz. Go to the Miami game last week, and Miami ran simulated pressures, and it really confused the Bills quite a bit. And so I'm sure Todd Bowles has seen all this. He's going to be cooking up blitzes. He's going to be cooking up, different simulated pressures. And what answers does Joe Brady have baked into this game plan for the Bills? Whether that's involving running backs in the passing game, out routes. How are you going to handle your protection schemes? Do you want to keep more players in to block? The Bills are very reluctant to have more than a 5-man blocking surface. So they got to have the right ideas here to combat a good Bucs pass rush that's very aggressive with its blitz packages.
Yeah, and I say Reddick's not going to play. That's my own opinion. I think it's trending that way. Keep an eye on the injury reports. Reddick did not practice on Wednesday. But yeah, this Bucs defense, it started off slow, but as the season has progressed, they have gotten better and better. And Todd Bowles, we know, is one of the masters at disguising what he's doing. There have been numerous times throughout the season where you'll see Hassan Reddick or Anthony Nelson or Yaya Diaby dropping in coverage because here comes Jacob Parrish or Tyke Smith on a blitz out of the slot position. So, he is going to get creative there, but then you also have to remember you're facing Josh Allen, who is always a threat to take off and make plays with his legs. So it's that fine line, that balance that Bowles has to find of being able to bring pressure and force some bad throws or hurry up that internal clock, and also not lose contain the way they did against the Patriots and allow Josh Allen to scaper off for 15 or 20 yards down the field. You started with the Bills offense against the Bucs defense. I'll start with the Bucs offense against the Bills. And I'm taking a look at the Bucs receivers against this Bills zone coverage. Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson have been at their best this season when facing zone. Egbuka is able to find that soft spot in the coverage and make some plays. Tez has been able to get a lot of yards after the catch, and the Bills are in zone on over 72% of defensive snaps. That's going to lend itself to big play potential from these two rookies, but especially Emeka Egbuka. He has a 66.7% reception percentage with 5 of his 6 touchdowns and over 600 yards this season against zone. There are going to be spots where he can really blow up in this game. You add that to the potential threat of Bucky Irving if he returns this week out of the backfield, things are going to open up even more. So I'm really focused on what this team is going to be able to do with that zone, with all these receivers that excel against that type of coverage.
I think that's a good talking point, and certainly the Bills are going to play zone. They're going to do that. And so with Maxwell Harrison healthy and back, that's their first round pick. They might have a little bit more of an appetite for some man coverage, but that's been the bread and butter, and I expect that to be the case again. And so that'll be a fun matchup, which sort of ties into my next thing here, James, which is kind of a matchup of questionable versus questionable. We're talking about the Bucs interior offensive line against the Bills interior defensive line. Graham Barton at center, we're good to go there, but the guard situation, I know that we're getting down the depth chart here on guard options for Tampa, and I don't think the Bills necessarily have the defensive tackle talent to really move the needle here. Daquan Jones is their most established player. He's one game removed from missing several with a calf injury. They have Deion Walker, a rookie out of Kentucky, who's certainly had his flashes this year, but not a player that's super consistent with how he processes and read blocks. When he's right, and he can make an impact, but he's still learning. He's a young player. You have Larry Ogunjobi, who's a veteran, that's more of a rotational player that's just coming off a suspension. And then a couple of practice squad guys like Phi Mathis and Jordan Phillips. Do the Bills have the type of players that can stress the depth of Tampa's interior offensive line? And they're getting deep into this depth chart. And so, when you have shaky versus shaky, I'm kind of curious to see if either team can find an edge there. And if the Bills can find an edge and get some pressure on Baker in his face, that's going to be huge. But if the Bills defensive tackles, can't rise to the occasion, and all of a sudden you got good pocket depth, you're getting some displacement in the run game that's been an issue for these players, then that's going to be an advantage for the Bucs. So you got shaky versus shaky. Which one can be less shaky, I think, is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I think that, again, will lend itself to an advantage for the Bucs if Bucky returns. I'll talk a little bit more about the running backs later on, but you're dealing with Mike Jordan, who was a practice squad player for the Bucs, who's been elevated now to the main roster, and then Dan Feeney, who was signed off of Buffalo's practice squad.
Yeah, he's got all the secrets, James.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we all know what an advantage that is. But yeah, Ben Bredesen, even though he was at practice on Wednesdays wearing a sleeve on his leg because of that hamstring injury, Todd Bowles says it is highly unlikely that he plays. I think it's honestly better off if he doesn't play. Do not put him back on the field too soon. Aggravate that hamstring injury, and now instead of losing him for a week, you lose him for a month. You can't deal with that with this offensive line. So it will be interesting to see who gets the push there in that situation. Unfortunately for Bucs fans, it's not the Bills' interior offensive line that is shaky, or otherwise Vita Vea would be having himself quite the game.
Well, I think any team's nervous. You're always, when Vita Vea is playing, it doesn't matter who your guards and centers are. That guy's different, right? That's a different kind of cat. That's what do we call a math changer and force multiplier. So the Bills have a pretty good interior offensive line, but Vita Vea is a different kind of cat.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm going to go next with this. I'm taking a look at the Bucs run defense against James Cook, and Cook is still one of the best backs in the league. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I love watching that dude play football. And the Bucs are coming off of a game where they gave up touchdown runs of 55 and 69 yards apiece. Cook is that dude that can score from anywhere on the field. So it's going to take a very disciplined run defense in order to keep him contained. But then, as I also mentioned earlier, the Bucs have been susceptible to pass catching running backs, and James Cook is absolutely a threat out of the backfield to catch a short, quick pass, and then all of a sudden turn on the jets and pick up 20, 25 plus yards. So you take a look at Josh Allen, who's an absolute magician and can do a lot of things with not as much firepower as Baker has on the other side in terms of the pass catchers. But if you can limit Cook's explosives and then keep the Bills in third and medium to third and long, this secondary is going to be able to create opportunities for takeaways against guys like Shakir and Coleman. Jamel Dean's playing at an all-pro level. Tyke Smith has been one of the most opportunistic players on this defense across the league, and the Bills have had some ball protection issues. So as long as you're not letting Cook get 4 to 6 yards a clip and you keep this game to where Allen is having to push the ball downfield with his arm, I think it's going to give this defense a chance to make a game-changing play.
We had a very similar thought here. My third matchup was the Bills running backs in the passing game. You mentioned some of the challenges that Tampa's had. They've given up the second most yards per game to running backs so far this year in the passing game. They're giving up 9.44 yards per play when a completed pass goes to opposing running backs. That's the most in the NFL. And the seventh worst in EPA per pass when targeting running backs. The Bills have 3 good pass catching backs: James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. They don't really throw the ball to them that often, but this is a game where that needs to change, in particular because of kind of what you mentioned there. I don't like the matchups on the perimeter for the Bills at all. You mentioned Jamel Dean's playing at an extremely high level. Zion McCollum is really coming into his own as a corner, and talking about Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers. They're not going to win those matchups. We'll see if the Bills get Josh Palmer back this week. I think that will happen, but it's still his first game in a while. And we'll see what he has, that day. And maybe they get Gabe Davis or not. But ultimately, no matter which combination of those four players I just said, I like those matchups for Tampa. And when you're not going to have Kincaid as kind of your middle of the field threat, you've got to get the ball to your running backs in the passing games. And so that's not really been a huge part of the Bills' offense this year, but this is kind of a ripe opportunity to do it for a number of factors. And so hopefully for the Bills, they can get Cook and Johnson and Davis some targets and maybe attack something that has been a challenge for Tampa so far this year. All right, coming up next, we're getting into the keys to victory, the winning script for both sides of this. We'll tell you what that is here next, folks. Be sure to stick with us. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else. This season, it's so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, or even yourself. Just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits, reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. BetterHelp makes that first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. Therapy isn't just for when things are falling apart. It's about staying balanced and growing through the tough seasons. And over 5 million people have used BetterHelp. And with over 30,000 therapists available, finding support is really just a few clicks away. So this month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn, because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? Joe Marino, Locked On Bills. James Yarcho, Locked On Bucs. Getting you ready here for Week 11. A big one. A lot of good games across the league this week, and it's going to be tough to watch them all because they're on at the same time. They got to spread these things out. I want to watch all these games. But Sunday at 1:00, we'll be dialed into Bills Bucs. And so, James, as you consider the script, the winning script for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming into Buffalo, what's on your mind? What's the keys to success?
On the offensive side of the ball, you have to stick with the run to almost a fault. You have to be so unbelievably stubborn because that's where the Bills defense is most vulnerable. So you cannot abandon it early on like the Bucs did against Detroit. Even though that game felt out of reach, it wasn't, but they abandoned the run so early that the Detroit defense was able to just tee off on Baker. So whether Bucky Irving is out there or not, you have to show that you're willing to run the ball behind a makeshift offensive line and stay two-dimensional. There's going to be opportunities to take shots to Ibuka and Tez, but you also need to get Cam Johnson, Cade Otton, and Sterling Shepard involved early. At that point, if Buffalo sees the willingness to throw to Cam Johnson, to throw to Shep, and of course they're going to throw to Cade Otton, but then you start spreading those guys out. You go 4 wide and clear the way a little bit for some running lanes to open up. Achane just gashed this defense. And while Rashad and Tucker are not Achane by any stretch of the imagination, if Bucky plays, he has that breakaway ability that Achane does. So this just can't be a situation where you run every first down, then you immediately throw on second down, and that's been their MO. It's led to really poor third down conversion rates because Baker's not willing to take off and run over the last 3 games. It changes the way the offense operates, and you keep putting yourself in long down and distance situations. So you have to continuously run the ball because at some point you're going to start to break off chunks, and that's when you're going to be able to control the clock and start to break down this Bills defense.
Yeah, one of my big keys in this game is don't let the Bucs rushing offense come to life. You said it. The Bills' run defense is really, really shaky. They're 27th in EPA per run. They allow an explosive run, which is 15 yards or more, 8.2% of the time. That's 4th highest in the NFL. They don't tackle well. They allow 0.21 missed tackles forced per attempt. That's number 2 in the NFL. And you can get a lot of yards after contact, 2.91 yards after contact per attempt. That's dead last comfortably. Even if this game script gets away from the Bucs, just keep running it. Don't stop. If the Bills get a 10-0 lead, 14-0 lead, you don't have to chase it. You can still run the football against the Bills. And so if I'm any team, that's what I'm doing. I think the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago when the Bills had a really good win against Kansas City, the Bills have to be extremely fortunate that they didn't stick with the run. And that's kind of the issue with Kansas City and Andy Reid. They never really do. But when they did, you saw it there, and you saw Miami and what they were able to do. It's not their defensive tackles are not firm against the run. They got small linebackers that struggle to play downhill. You got to challenge that. You should challenge that, whether it's Bucky Irving or not.
Yeah. And then, you have to, I realize Grizz isn't playing with a full deck, right? He doesn't have Mike. He doesn't have Chris. He doesn't have, Jalen McMillan. And it's changed the way that he's been able to call plays. And I think this Baker injury is really playing into that as well. He has 0 rush attempts in the last 3 games. He has not rushed the ball since he stretched out for a first down against the San Francisco 49ers. And that's changed the way defenses have been able to play him. They're able to tee off a little bit more and bring more pressure because they know he's not going to escape and take off. They can drop more guys into coverage and force him to be a statue when his accuracy has been off because of the oblique. So the recipe for this one is you have to run the ball.
I'm with you on that. From the Bills side of things, I think that's got to be a big part of their equation as well, running the football. You got to test this Bucs run defense. I certainly have a ton of respect for Vita Vea and Levante David, and they're typically a very, very good run defense. They've had some moments where they've given up some explosive runs this year. They gave up a $166 to New England, a couple of big runs for Travion Henderson, 164 to the Lions. Of course, Jahmyr Gibbs had a big game there. And, James Cook's an explosive back too. And I think you got to try to find your opportunities to get those explosive runs. Since week 5, Tampa has allowed the highest percentage of rushing yards in the NFL on explosive runs. 50.4% of all the rushing yards they have given up since week 5 have been explosive runs. So they're giving some of this up. You got to see if you can get some of that to go your way. And so far, 6% of their overall runs this year go for 15 plus. That's the 8th highest in the NFL. The Bills have a very unique run scheme. Of course, when you have Josh Allen as a quarterback, that's always influential in the run scheme because you're always +1 with that threat. But, they'll put multiple tight ends on the field. They got a really good young blocking tight end in Jackson Hawes. Knox can block. They use the fullback in Gilliam. They're multifaceted in terms of gap and run schemes. And so they got to have the right formula here to test this. I know that, there are certainly times where the Bucs bow up and there's no space, but I think you got to find out just based on some of the susceptibility. Is that a word? I don't know. For the Bucs to be giving up some longer runs this year and see if James Cook, who's good at getting those long runs, can rip off a couple here against Tampa.
Yeah, and I think that plays perfectly into the key for the Bucs defensively is stay disciplined. This defense has been so good for most of the season, but you can go back and you can look at 1 or 2 plays per game where they were not disciplined, where there was a guy out of position that has led to those explosives. Travion Henderson is the perfect example. The Bucs held the Patriots overall to 42 rushing yards on 25 attempts outside of the 55-yarder and the 69-yarder, which were mental mistakes by the players. So stay disciplined, keep your contain. Don't let somebody bounce outside where there is no one left defensively to try to slow them down or stop them. And you're going to give yourself a chance to get a road upset.
I think something else here for the Bills on offense that they have to be committed to is their play action passing offense. Bucs have been giving up some play action. They're 29th in EPA per play against play action. They give up 10.1 yards per play. That's 31st in the league when tested with the play action play. And Josh Allen's very good at executing play action. He's top 5 in the league in EPA per drop back with play action. And so I've studied the Bucs pretty much all morning trying to find these little areas that there's some susceptibility. And I thought throwing the ball to running backs and play action and explosive runs were kind of the issues there defensively. And for the Bills, they got to find ways to get that going for themselves because again, I don't think there's going to be good matchups for the Bills at receiver against Tampa. So where do you find it? Play action, explosive runs, throwing the ball to running backs. I think that's your formula for Buffalo to get a win.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Josh Allen's pretty good at just about everything, not just play action.
Well, it's that's not incorrect, but there's certainly been games this year where it's just not there. It wasn't there last week. I know you look at the box score; he's 28 of 40 for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. You're like, oh, that's not that bad. Watch the tape. Mm-hmm. You'll see some of the struggle that existed there. Even go back to the Carolina game; he was really efficient, but watch the tape. You can see that it's a little harder than it needs to be. And so I know that Todd Bowles has the opportunity here to maybe make it hard on Josh Allen. But great quarterback matchup, James. I'm excited for it. And an important game for both of these teams. Obviously, the Bucs, I think, have a really good shot to run away with that division, but the Bills are in a dogfight here with New England. And I couldn't let this podcast end without, saying, hey, thanks for nothing. Thanks for nothing last week against the Patriots. Both needed that one to happen, but it complicates the path for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the difference in this game is going to lie is if I'm the Bills, this is a must win, or the division might get out of reach. You take a look at New England's schedule the rest of the way, it is an absolute cakewalk. Yeah. The Bills have no room for error. The Bucs aren't going to have that level of intensity because they still get the Panthers twice. But even if they lose and the Panthers win, the Bucs are still in first place in the division. So it's hard to manufacture that kind of do or die mentality, but it's certainly not going to be an easy game for either of these teams.
All right. You said it at the beginning. Let's do this again in February, please.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. All right, folks. Thanks for being here. This has been a fun conversation. Appreciate you, James, for showing up and having a great conversation here today on this crossover Thursday. Plenty of coverage coming before and after the game for both of these podcasts, Locked On Bucs and Locked On Bills. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to catching up with you again real soon.